Hey YouTube, welcome to Conquering Jericho. This is my first YouTube video, and despite the fact that I've been watching YouTube videos for years and I couldn't even begin to count the amount of videos that I've absorbed, this is the first one that I'm producing myself. The title of this video is What's in a Name? You, Your Story, History. You see, I feel led, called, urged to create this channel in this introductory video, not for some agenda other than to depart from the noise that you commonly see on social media. You see, I'm not coming with any agenda to persuade you, to influence you. I'm simply coming to add perspective through the lens of a person who's lived a lot of different lives in 43 years, to offer perspectives from my observations, my experiences, my research, the knowledge that I've gained from being a husband, a father, a young child, an Air Force veteran, a manager, leader of people, an instructor. I've been a lot of things. One of the things that I've been is someone who, despite my upbringing in Christianity, someone who lived a life that for many years was looked completely hypocritical to what a Christian's life is supposed to look like. I'm not ashamed of that. Why? Because it led me to the truth. And one, call it fateful day, at the end of a rope of sorts, emotionally, mentally, just exhausted, at 38 years old, I fell down in the front yard of my childhood home on my knees because the weight of the life that I had lived, the pain that I had caused other people, the pain that I had inside of myself had become so unbearable that the only thing that I had left to know to do was to test, try, and prove that if there was a God, I needed His help to help me change, to bring me up out of the pit that I had found myself in. And yes, it was most definitely an act of faith. You see, faith is something that we like to put a label on and try to explain it, but faith is simply believing in something that you can't see, that's not tangible to you. So that night, that's exactly what I did. I just began to acknowledge verbally the person that I was. I apologized to God because I knew that if me being a father, if one of my children, son or daughter, I've fathered three and been blessed to raise five, at least to some extent. But I knew that the things that I had done in my life, if I was that child or trying to tell them to my own father, even, that they wouldn't want to hear them. And but despite that, I would, as a father, forgive them. And so I knew that the Creator, if He was indeed real, that He must have standards, but that number one, He would love me irregardless. I just needed to acknowledge it. See, I knew this because raising my own children, anytime that they did something that that was rebellious or, just blatantly rule breaking or whatever the case was, or even a mistake, Would I get angry? Sure, on occasion. A lot of times when I was, younger, as a dad, I didn't know how to handle certain things. If you're a parent, you can most definitely relate. There's plenty of books out there to teach you how to be a parent, but until you actually have children and begin to raise them, those books don't do anything for you. They might give you some guidelines and some frameworks, but ultimately you have to figure each child out and raise that child. And no child is the same. None of us are the same. And that's what your name is all about. See, you were given a name at birth. You didn't pick the name. And then we spend our whole life trying to figure out, who is this person? Who am I? Who is Jericho? And that night, I realized that the person that I had become was somebody I didn't want to be. You see, I had become, despite my upbringing, I had great examples. I was blessed in that way. I had a mother and father who, until the passing of my father 9 years ago, stayed married my whole life. That's rare these days, and I'm blessed to say that. But despite my upbringing, I became a womanizer. I became an adulterer. I cheated on my first wife. I cheated on my second wife. And despite me not wanting to, it's like I couldn't help myself. And it tore me up inside. Don't get me wrong. It absolutely did. Each and every time I'd feel so guilty about it. But then faced with the next opportunity, I'd cave. I was weak. Something about, the attention. A lot of that stemmed from me being bullied as a child. I was bullied most of my childhood, from kindergarten all the way through about 8th grade. I never felt like I fit in. You see, despite the fact that I'm a middle-aged white male, I grew up in a community that was predominantly Hispanic, like 80-something%. So I was, for all intents and purposes, a minority. I was a skinny white kid. I had no real meat on my bones until I was off in the military at 18 years old. And probably not even then. It was probably more just strength and tonality. It wasn't until, became a dad and this and that I probably actually put on some decent weight. But the fact of the matter is, back to that night, the weight of all of these things that I had done in my life, I felt them. But I knew that the only way that they would come off of me, just like the way that they would come off of my children, was for me to say that I forgave them. And I'd console them and tell them it was going to be okay, that I didn't hold anything against them. And I would see that come off of them. I'd see the light come back into their life. And they'd hug me and maybe we'd cry. And so 5 years ago, in January of 2020, when I had that moment for myself, I didn't have my earthly father anymore. He had passed on. And you men out there listening to this, you know what it's like to have the weight of the world on your shoulders, to have a wife and children who look up to you, to be the provider, to be, the strong man of the house, to help everybody fix their problems, no matter what they might be, whenever they might be, from, repairing things that need to be repaired around the house, to, swinging the kids around, to, being there for your wife in whatever she might be going through with family or friends, or, grocery lists, or, paying bills, or whatever it might be. We bear a lot. That's why we have big shoulders. But we can't bear it alone. And we definitely can't keep it inside. I've learned that much. And so that night, I relinquished it. I began to call out to my Father in heaven, all by faith, saying, God, if there's any way that I can have this all taken from me, all these things. And I just began to proclaim these things that I knew that I had done, that just inside I knew that wasn't right. Lying, stealing, even as a child, cheating, getting angry, screaming, rageful. As I began to do that, something began to happen inside of me. And it was like once I listed off these things that I knew just on the surface I had done that were eating me up. It was like everything that I had ever done began to just kind of pour out of me. Now, I'm not saying every single person is going to have the same experience. This was my experience. I didn't read this in a book. This happened to me. And as that happened to me, I was just bawling. I mean, I was full-blown bawling. Puddle of tears underneath me in the dirt. But what happened next was the most amazing thing I'd ever experienced in my life. You see, throughout these videos that I'll be sharing with you guys, one thing about me, none of this is going to be ever scripted. It'll be unfiltered, unedited. I'll post the video just as it is, because I believe that's one of the things that's missing, especially more now that we have artificial intelligence weaving its way into the very fabric of everything that we do. Raw, authentic, original human conversation and relatability is what's needed. So I intend to share that with you. Like I said, if for nothing more, just to give you some perspective, to show you that you don't have to carry these burdens around. Man, woman, child, it doesn't matter. That there is a God and He really does love you. See, statistically, we can't create a child. I've known several people in my life that they tried and tried and tried and tried and never had children. I've known other people that tried and tried and then got pregnant and never could bring one to term, or when they did, it was stillborn or died of SIDS a week later. That was a devastating story I'll share with you one day. And then other people, they just seem to, it's like every, year they're having a child. Some are born with abnormalities, diseases. And we can't determine in the moment, in the act of conception, what's going to happen. And so for that reason, it's always just made sense to me that there's a creator, there's something out there that goes against statistical odds and determines whether a life comes into this world or it doesn't. Or is formed in the womb or isn't. So after I began to pour my heart out and confess all of my sins that I knew inside of myself were sins, they were wrong, they hurt people. Sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly. Sometimes people I cared about, sometimes people I didn't even know. But as soon as all of that happened, what happened next to me was something I would have never anticipated. You could have never told me that was going to happen to me, and I would have believed it to that moment. But it felt like warm honey or warm oil, like olive oil being poured all through me and all outside of me, and enveloped me in comfort and peace like I had never experienced before. And I began to, instead of crying out of shame and guilt, I began to weep because I felt this love, this peace, this, like I would when I'd have my own child talking to me. and how much I loved them, and no matter what they did, at the end of the day, I just loved them. You see, that is the God of heaven, the God of the Bible. In fact, he loved you so much that he sent his only begotten Son in the flesh to walk on the earth, to teach us how to access this gift of immeasurable love, to have peace and joy on the inside of us. But it takes the acknowledgement that we are sinners. There's nothing wrong with saying it. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging it. We have all fallen short. We've all messed up. We've all made mistakes. He knows that. But if we're so prideful that we can't even acknowledge it, that's going to keep us separated from him. As a parent, you know if your kid is doing something wrong. You might even call them out on it, but if they continue to lie and say they're not doing it, you're going to get pretty frustrated. God has his limits too. He doesn't want that. No, of course not. No father, no mother does. So I hope that through these videos that you'll find that my life experiences are something that can give you hope. Because I'll share everything from the very beginning when I was a child and going through, school age, what it felt like to be bullied, what it felt like to, be called gifted and talented, smart, and all of these things while feeling like I just didn't fit. What it felt like to go off into the military, what it felt like to fall in love the first time or think I did. What it felt like to have children. What it felt like to have success, to have loss, to have financial freedom, to have no finances, to being homeless. I've been there. I want to share my life story because I feel like it's going to be relatable. My job is not to persuade you one way or the other. It's to share my own life story. His story. And how that my name of Jericho led to the conquering of Jericho and the falling down of walls and strongholds. Just like it says in the Bible, just like Joshua when he marched around it 7 days with his army. And on that seventh day, they marched around 7 times and the walls came crumbling down. You see, life comes at all of us and we go through it. You can't go around it, you can't go over it, you can't go under it, you can't miss it. Every day life comes at you full force. And it can become unbearable. I know that. But it doesn't have to stay that way. No matter where you find yourself today, no matter what's going on in your life, no matter what's happened in your life to this point, it's your story. It's his story. And he wants to continue to write his story in your life. I know that because he's done it for me. So I appreciate you watching this video. And if you feel led to like it, share it, great. That's fantastic. But more importantly, I hope that it gave you some insight and some perspective and some opportunity to take a look at yourself, at your story, at who you are, and determine if who you are and your story is at a place where it's time to inject his story, God's story, the story of your creation by your creator, and meet him as I did that night. Because I've been on a journey since that night that I would have never anticipated. But I've never been filled with more love, more peace, more joy. And when we get to the part of talking about where I am today, it's going to kind of maybe kind of blow your mind as to how I could possibly have that. But I assure you it's true. So as a fellow human being, just know that I love you for who you are. And God most certainly loves you exactly how you are. He knows you better than you know you. I can assure you of that. And all he's wanting you to do is acknowledge him and acknowledge that you have sinned. Just ask him to forgive you, and he most certainly will. That is the free gift of salvation. It is a free gift. You don't have to work for it. But if you let him, he'll come in to your life, come into your heart, and flood you on the inside and help you become the person that no longer is burdened with guilt and shame and sin. If you're a liar, he'll take that away from you. If you're heavily addicted to something that you know is destroying you, he'll free you from that. If you're walking in adultery, fornication, whatever it might be that you know is just eating you alive and you don't have that peace on the inside, he'll take it away. But it takes your faith. And it's difficult sometimes to have faith in something you can't quite see. So if anything, I hope that my story will inspire faith inside of you. Because I'm not anybody. I'm just a man. I'm a man with a story. I'm a man who didn't ask to be born. I'm a man who didn't ask for the name that I got. But I'm his story because he allowed my creation. And I sit here as a testament to his perfection, his glory, his grace, and his love for me and for you. So until next time, whenever that might be, consider your story. Let him start to make his story in your life. And if you already know him, what a beautiful thing. Take care, guys.